Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to go over how to make a new extension in JsDbg. Just earlier today my colleague Daniel Libby was making a new extension called the Chromium layer tree, and together we were able to build it out, build a bare bones version of that out fairly quickly. In this demo I'm going to be using that same extension, we'll probably see a subset of it. Hopefully that will be enough to give you an idea of how to build your own extension. So if you're building any tree-based extension like the DOM tree or the AX tree or the layer tree, there's already a very convenient template available in JsDbg. It is called the tree extension template. So if you want to make your own extension, all you have to do is make a copy of that. Since we're building an extension for Chromium, we're going to place that inside the Chromium folder. And we'll name it CC layer tree. We also rename the JS file for convention, and now in VS Code we'll go fill out these files. Okay, so first thing is we want to change the name of our extension. Change the author too. This is not the extension that we'll be checking in, but Daniel Libby will provide a more full-fledged version of this hopefully soon. Some sort of a description. Inspect the Chromium layer tree. Now, these two dependencies we'll definitely need. We will also need two more for this. We will want some STL helpers, and we'll also want Chromium helpers. Augments debug object just means whenever a debug object is loaded, we want this to be loaded. We do want to specify some target modules. We only want to load this when we are debugging Chromium or one of its variants. So we'll add these two target modules. And one more thing we have to do in this page is, by default, the template is specified to be headless. We want this to not be headless so that it shows up on the JsDbg landing page and in the drop down above. Now this is the HTML file that we see. I'll change the title for this. Most of the view really comes from the tree inspector. It has a lot of inbuilt functionality. We will just need to fill in these functions in the in the JS file. Let's just rename this. Okay. These. Okay. So the first thing that I want to do before we talk about what these functions do or try to build this extension out is let's just see if we can see a bare bones version of CC layer tree on the page. Oh, my server's not running. Start that up. No, let's see. Oh, okay, I know. I did miss a step here. I also need to add CC layer tree as a dependency for the Chromium extension. Okay. Alright, so this is basically the template just renamed for CC layer tree. Now let's go over what these fields do and let's try to start filling them in. So the tree member right here just constructs a new tree here. This is what we would need to be able to add or remove children within the tree. The renderer will give us functionality to be able to change the way nodes in the tree are rendered. Interpret address, this is the function that will be called whenever a value is provided in this address bar, either from a root, or if you copy and paste some value from your debugger, when you hit load, that's the function that will be run. Get roots is a way for us to get default values for this extension, and default types is some types that you can specify so that they appear by default in the right pane over here. So for the layer tree, we want any given address to be interpreted as either a layer or a layer tree host. Any of those are fine. So let us, actually this void is a good place to start. You can do some error handling. If the object is not null, then we'll do something, otherwise just null. Here we'll first try to cast it to one of the types. Let's start with layer. And what this dcast does is it will attempt to cast the object to a CC layer, and if it can, then it will return that object, otherwise it will just return null. So in here we want to check for null again. If it's not null, just return layer. Otherwise, let's try to return let's try to do another dcast, this time to a layer tree host. Okay, that seems fine for interpret address. I don't actually have an address right now. I'm not broken in a good point in the debugger. Otherwise I could have pasted and tried this out, but I think we'll just go into get roots, and that should give us something for the address. So now get roots actually took me and Libby a little bit of time to implement, so I'm just gonna copy and paste what we have and try to explain that. Now mind you, this may not look at all like what the actual layer tree extension that gets checked in looks like, but hopefully this is good enough to give you an idea of how to implement it. So we start off from some global symbol called the gViewMap. Inside the viewMap is a mapping from a web view to a render view impl, and from the render view impl we can go retrieve a layer tree host. And the way we do that is we get the underlying map, we get the values, and then we can dereference these members down to the layer tree host. So now if I refresh the page, it's a little slow, but we should see a host appear and something in our tree. So as you can see, we have something in our tree, but there's really no children. So now let's go in and add some children to this tree. This is what we will use the tree for, and the add children functionality. Let's first start by adding some children to the layer tree host. This add children function can return either an array or even just a single object. In the case of the layer tree host, I think there will only be one child, which will be the root layer. We can get that from, oops, that looks like a bug. We can get that from the root layer right here. So root layer, pater. Great. This is the root layer. Oh, actually looks like it's a vtable cast. I think it's better for us to display these children as their actual type, so let's perform a vcast so that we can get it as a picture layer there. Right, now we also, now this is obviously not the entire tree, we want to make sure we add children to every layer as well. So let's need another add children function, this time for layer. And to get the children for any given layer, we need to go into the inputs and then expand the children vector. There. So, layer, inputs, so now this children returns a STL vector. To be able to get all of the entries in the vector, we can invoke this array field that has already been added in JsDbg called elements. We invoke that with the .array function. Now this is not it. Right now what we have is an array of scoped ref pointers. We need to turn that into an array of CC layer objects. So we will use the map function. Promise.map is declared in the promise extension. It works pretty much the same as array.map. It's just that it accepts promised arrays. From here we have scoped ref pointer, and we want to get what's underneath it, and we also want to vcast it. Now this looks like a tree. So now that we have a tree, I also wanted to quickly show you what this name renderer and action fields do. The name renderer, I don't really think we need. We need one for this extension, but just so you can get a feel for what it does, let's add one anyways. So the name renderer can be used to change the name of any given type in the tree. So here let's give layer a special name, like every layer a special name, special layer. There you go, so now everything becomes special layer. Obviously it's not a very interesting example, but this can be useful for adding some extra information to particular types. The AX tree does use this functionality. Okay, let's remove that. We don't really need this. And let's look at actions. Actions are most useful when you have some interactions between two different extensions. For example, from one extension, you maybe do some type exploration, and then you reach a type, and you want to use a different extension to inspect that type. That's where this action can come in, but it's we can add it anyways, even though we're just dealing with, we really only have one extension for layers. Typically we just call it, it needs to be the name of the extension. Layer. So now let's refresh the page. And what that action does is it provides a little link here called CC layer tree, and when you click on that, it will open that particular node up in its own extension page. And you can do that for obviously any layer in the tree.